What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Video, and we've got another Meta Reaper deck to discuss. And this is not going to be everyone's favorite deck, for sure, but it is a deck that is running around in the format that is very powerful. In fact, in the Reaper Discord server, decks like this are labeled as Tier 1. So, I figured I'd cover it here. And that is this sort of stall deck. Now, there are many different ways to build stall. This deck is going for more of a stall burn thing, using stealth birds, wave motion cannons, and nightmare wheels to burn down the opponent, while you also set up floodgates like level limit area B, gravity bind, skill drain, etc. to sort of wall up, and prevent them from really doing anything. And this is a very, very effective strategy, Things like Graceful and Pot are not in the format anymore, so drawing power is a lot lower, which means that drawing into your outs for these sorts of things is a lot lower and a lot less likely. And so, it is a very powerful deck that can, basically take wins in Game 1. Now, Games 2 and 3, people can side against it, side in the spell and trap removal and the hate to sort of take down this sort of deck. But games 2 and 3, you can always smoke screen into something else. And this deck here is smoke screening into a sort of Stein OTK. It's not playing the Last Wills, but it is playing triple Stein, a Cyber Jar to turbo into more, double Emergency Provisions here to buff up the life points for Stein, triple Giant Trunade here, Heavy Storm, Limited Removal, triple Megamorph, and a Mystical Space Typhoon. So it can sort of go into Stein after siding. Now, I should mention that this list was piloted by the user Gia to actually win the latest Reaper tournament that happened before the monthly tournament that we were doing here. Now, that tournament only had, a very small number of people. There were only like 9 people in it. So, you can take that result with a grain of salt. But even before, back in the olden days when Reaper was very, very popular and tournaments were getting a ton of people, you still had stall burn decks winning. I think the Duel's Care actually won a major event with Stallburn as well. So, Stallburn is a very threatening deck, and, it does win tournaments, and this is very, very good. Now, because I'm not Gia, I am not as skilled with this deck, and in fact, in the replays you'll see, I make many, many misplays with this deck. So I will be going through and talking about those misplays and basically saying how if I hadn't misplayed, I might have won the game here. And, that does show both how powerful the deck can be and also how difficult it is to pilot. There are a lot of different moving parts that you need to think about. It plays on a different axis than most other decks in the format. And so you really do need to sort of have a good grasp on the deck if you want to bring it to a tournament play. So we'll be going through the replays and talking about my misplays there. But let's just finish up the card by card before we do that. I also want to mention, if we're siding into this smoke screen, the way that I normally did it was I'd side out the triple Skill Drain as it conflicts with Stein. I'd side out the triple Judgment, the triple Magic Jammer, the double 7 tools. So that right there is 11 cards. I'd side out of the exchanges, I believe, as well, and also the Wall's Revealing Light, because I felt like Wall is, not really the best to play with Stein. It does wall things up, but yeah, it's a bit tough to maneuver, so that way you still have over 5,000 life points to pay for Stein after that. The Emergency Provisions does help sometimes. Emergency Provisions can also shut down your own floodgates, so I don't actually know if Gia, for instance, kept in like the skill drain stuff, just relying on the Trunades and the Emergency Provisions to clear that. That's oftentimes how you have to do it. If you've got a floodgate up and you need to go for the Stein play, you've got plenty of ways to clear your own floodgates. But I figured that the counter traps were not really as necessary because, I figure that, we're trying to go for major damage very quickly. And, we don't really need the 7 tools because people aren't going to keep threatening Roar in against Burn unless they predict the smoke screen. If they predict the smoke screen, we're well and truly countered. But, I feel like these counter traps aren't really necessary post-siding if you're going in for the smoke screen strat. So that was my sort of philosophy behind how I adjusted the deck in smoke screen siding. Gia might have smoke screened into different cards here. Just the 15 cards exactly, I'm not sure what they were, but it is definitely a very, very powerful smoke screen that you can go into. But let's go through the rest of the card by card here. We got 2 big Shield Guardian to act as a great defender, and under Skill Drain, this thing is also really, really good. We got a Morphing Jar here to draw deeper into the deck. We've got triple Mystic Tomato to turbo into Sangan, Reaper, or Stealth Bird, which are the 4 remaining monsters in the deck. Sangan can search out anything else in the deck. Reaper can wall up, and Stealth Bird deals some burn. Got a Comfy to rip cards out of hand in exchange for a very, very similar reason. You can basically use this as a pseudo hand rip if you sort of commit most of your hand to the board, and then you give your opponent one of your cards. So very, very interesting tech in this format. Dark Hole to wipe away the board, double level limit, and double gravity bind to slow things down. A Sword of Revealing Light also to slow down attacks. Triple Wave Motion Cannon to provide a bit of needed burn. You got Fake Trap to protect your trap cards from things like Heavy Storm, Mobius, etc. You got Triple Magic Jammer to also protect from very powerful spells. You've got Triple Nightmare Wheel here to slow down the game and also to burn your opponent. You got double 7 Tools of the Bandit to deal with things like Dust Tornado and other trap cards. You've got a triple skill drain package here to stop your opponent's things like Stein, etc. You've got triple Solemn Judgment to stop any other plays that are not sort of covered by whatever floodgates you have at the time. A Torrential Tribute to wipe away the board, and double Wall of Revealing Light to stop your opponent from attacking. And as I mentioned for the side, this is a Smoke Screen side. For the Fusion deck, pretty standard Fusion deck in this format. We play with an unlimited Fusion deck, so you can really proxy in whatever Fusion monster that might not be here that you need. But we've got a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon for big attack, Cyber Blader because the third effect can come up occasionally. You got a Cyber End Dragon for piercing, Cyber Twin Dragon for double attacks, Dark Bolt of the Terrible for negating monster effects, Dark Blade the Dragon Knight for banishing cards from grave, Dragoness the Wicked Knight for just getting under your own floodgates. You've got a Fiend Skull Dragon for stopping trap targeting, as well as flip effects. You've got a Gatling Dragon for blowing up the board. You've got a King Dragoon for stopping targeting effects. You've got an Ojama King to lock up your opponent's zones. You've got a Reaper on the Nightmare to rip cards out of their hand. You've got a Ryu Senshi to negate normal traps as well as spells that target. You've got a Last Warrior to stop summons, and a Thousand-Eyed Trick to suck up your opponent's stuff. But that's going to do it for the list. Now, again, I'm not the most skilled player with this sort of list, so I definitely do make a lot of misplays. But let's dive into the replays and see exactly what misplays I make and what I would have done differently. Okay, our first game here is against Dumptruck. If you're in the channel, always a pleasure to have them on. We're diving in to the rock, paper, scissors here. And we are going to lose that rock, paper, scissors. So we are going to be going second. But I think we should be able to recover as long as we have a decent enough hand. This deck doesn't really need to go first or second. That's a very decent hand here, honestly. They go for a Comfy, though, so, that's very unfortunate out of the gate. They rip a Comfy out of our hand and leave us with those floodgates. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw Fake Trap. That's really, really good. We're just going to set Fake Trap, Wall, and Skill Drain, pass back to them. My reason behind this is that, if they go for a heavy or something, which might be a reason why they left us with these floodgates, then we've got Fake Trap to protect our stuff, so I think that should be good. They're going to go for the heavy indeed. There's the Fake Trap. We reveal that we've got a Skill Drain and a Wall. They're going to flip up the Mystic Tomato there, try and attack in. We go for Wall, paying 3,000 because we're not on the Stein stuff yet. I feel like that walls off a lot of potential attacking in. But they have an MST in hand, so that's not going to work there. We take another 14. They are going to set one, pass back to us. Now, the good thing is they've used up a heavy and an MST, so I feel okay about this. We can just commit pretty much everything on the board, go for a level limit, pass back to them. And they're going to go for Raigeki Break on our level limit. So Raigeki Breaks are really tough, in the main deck against this deck, as they can stop more of our floodgates. So they're going to flip that Mystic Tomato to attack in. And we are just going to use the Wall of Revealing Light for just 2,000 here, so that way our Skill Drain is still online. I do feel like Skill Drain is worth, keeping online here. Although we don't want to activate it yet because we just drew into Morphing Jar, so that's pretty good for us. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw a Solemn. We're going to set that Solemn, then flip the Morphing Jar, rip 2 cards out of hand, so they lose a Return from the Different Dimension and a Jinzo. I'm very happy that Jinzo is gone there. And we both draw 5 cards, so I feel pretty good about that. We also draw Exchange, so we've got a couple different options here. We're going to go for a Dark Hole because we want to get in a little bit more burn here. So we're going to wipe the board away there, go for a Mystic Tomato, and attack in for 14. And, drop them down to 56. So we are getting in for more damage here. And as long as we can just, we might not be able to keep getting in with attacks, but as long as we can sort of wall out our opponent for the near future, we should eventually be able to draw into our other burn. So main 2, we go for Exchange to see what they're working with here. We get a peek at their hand. See, they've got a Warrior Lady, a Torrential, a Return from the Different Dimension, a Chaos Orc, and a Premat. I think what I want to take here is the Chaos Orc because I really don't want them to, get this online. It can stop things like Nightmare Wheel because we use Nightmare Wheel on a monster. They banish it with Sorc and get over Wall of Revealing Light. That's not good either. So yeah, I think what I want to do is I want to take the Sorc and then give them the big shield. Now, the issue with this is that they've got the Premat in hand, so they can bring back Jinzo next turn. But that is ultimately fine because I can just change Skill Drain to the Premat, and once Jinzo hits field, Skill Drain will be active, so Skill Drain will negate the Jinzo effect. I believe that is how that ruling works. Jinzo can attack over the wall, which is annoying, but we do have Nightmare Wheel to stop the Jinzo. So, I think that that's what I should do on this following turn. Unfortunately, they go for Premat here, and I just go for Solemn instead to prevent them from getting Jinzo on field at all. I think that is a major misplay. I think I should have just gone for Skill Drain instead. Now our Skill Drain is dead, So, you know, we can't activate it at all. And we could have saved Solemn. Like, if they've got MST or something off the top. Well, actually, they can't even have MST off the top. But let's say they've got another Raigeki break in that background to stop the skill drain. We can go for Solemn on the Raigeki break. And so that ultimately still works out. So, unfortunately, I didn't see that at the time, or I wasn't thinking about that at the time. So, yeah, it's going to get a little bit bad for us. We do draw a Nightmare Wheel, which is pretty good. We can just get the burn going a bit more here. We set the Tomato there, pass back to them. And they go for Scapegoat here. That's perfectly fine. We do know about the TT, so this is going to trigger that TT, but ultimately I think that's okay. We don't really care about having this extra Mystic Tomato. And they're going to set one, pass back to us. We go for a Nightmare Wheel on that. And then we're just going to decide, like, we need to get the screws on our opponent. We're going to go for another Nightmare Wheel as well. So I could have waited here, but, you know, this puts them on a bit of a faster clock. And I wasn't really considering what else they might have here, because I was just like, I want to put them on a clock here. I want to make sure that I can kill them the next couple of turns. And to be fair, we are very, very close to killing them. You know, this Wave Mode can deal 1,000 next turn. These Nightmare Wheels deal another 1,000 next turn. So we are pretty close to getting them down to 0, but unfortunately they do have a Magician of Faith here. And again, if Skill Drain was up, this wouldn't have really mattered. If I had played the Nightmare Wheels a bit better, so if I had, you know, just used one on that set and then used another on the new set, then that wouldn't have really mattered. But as is, they do, you know, get the heavy, and we just basically lose the game to that. So, yeah, that's going to do it for that game there. And again, you know, I think if I had played that differently, we would have, like, won the game, right? Because after we skill drain, they get Jinzo. Sure, they get it on field, but then we Nightmare Wheel the Jinzo. They could potentially tribute that Jinzo for something else later, but we've got another Nightmare Wheel to stop that. And they don't really have a good way to deal with our back row at that point. So I think that if I had just, you know, played it a bit more coolly, and if I had, you know, gone for the skill drain, stopped the Jinzo, I had Solomon's backup then as well. I get double Nightmare Wheel, so I've got a lot of different options there for how to both burn them out and also stall them further. So I think I did majorly misplay there. But we're going to go into the game 2 here. And I do go into the smokescreen side because I do want to show it off. And I do feel like after seeing all that burn in game 1, they are not going to expect the smokescreen in game 2. So I just go for a set of a big shield and a gravity bind. Hopefully they attack into the big shield, and then I can deal a little bit more damage there. But we've got the gravity bind up in case they go like side right into Zaborg and then attack indirectly. We want to stop that 2400 from going through. But they're just going to set 5 and pass. And now I have the read that that set is a Morphing Jar. Morphing Jar is pretty decent in post-siding because you can use Morphing Jar to draw into things like your spell and trap removal. So I do kind of like Morphing Jar in the side. So I have the read that that's a Morphing Jar, and I just want to get aggressive here. So I'm going to go for a True Nade, bounce back everything, and go for the Cyber Stein. Unfortunately, they do have a Dust Tornado to pop the Gravity Bind, but we still have another Floodgate coming after this. We go for Cyber Stein and go into a Cyber End, because I don't mind losing the hand to a Morphing Jar here. I could have also potentially gone for Gatling Dragon, use Gatling Dragon Defect, try and pop the set and the Stein to sort of wall up against certain things. But I think End is also fine. It also gets a bit more of a clock on them. And unfortunately, it is a Dekoichi. It's not a Morphing Jar. So they still get their full back row suite there. And we don't actually win the game here. Part of the reason why I also went for this is that, like, if it was Morphing Jar, I didn't want to lose both Steins here because we've only got 3 Steins in the deck. And I really want the Steins to be in the deck because that's sort of our main win con after siding here, given that they will probably be on more spell and trap removal for our floodgates. So I felt like I had to do this early. Unfortunately, it did not work out there. I could have potentially played it a bit differently there, waited a little bit longer, but I was very afraid of the Morphing Jar, so that's why I didn't do that. I'm just going to set another big shield here. They're going to set more pass back to us. It looks like they don't have a way to remove the level limit that well, so I feel pretty good about this. I set a Cyberstein, and I just set a Megamorph. These are both bluffs to try and bait out spell and trap removal, and it does work. They go for an MST on the new set, which I'm perfectly fine with, as we don't really have any monsters to pair with Megamorph at this point. They're going to set another pass back to us. I draw an exchange. I could go for exchange here, given a Spirit Reaper and getting a peek at what their hand is, but I feel like giving them a monster they can attack under the level limit is not really that good, as well as a monster that walls up my stuff, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to set the exchange as another bluff, and they go for it again. They go for Dust Tornado on the exchange. I feel perfectly fine about that. They flip up a Treeborn Frog, use TT to pop the board, and then just pass back to us. We draw a Wall of Writhing Light, which is pretty good here. We can go for a Reaper, rip a card out of their hand, which I do think is the correct thing to do. It's a little bit worrying because we are at only 3k, but if they do have something, it probably gets walled up by level limit here. And then main 2, we got to decide what to do here exactly. I could hold the wall in hand, but I feel like wall is honestly kind of useless here if I don't set it this turn, right? Like, let's say they've got a way to clear the level limit and then attack over the Reaper. then, you know, I'm taking probably over 1,000 damage, and then I'm down to below 2,000. There's no point in using wall for 1,000, right? So, I mean, I could hold it in case I draw emerging provisions later, and then, you know, it's more online. But yeah, I think I should have sided out this wall. I think this game I kept in the exchange and the wall. You know, I said in siding that that would probably be the better side deck plan here. But I think I kept these in here just because I was trying to experiment with what the siding was doing. I think I took out some stealth birds, maybe. I forget exactly what I took out. But it was definitely not the right move to keep in the walls because, again, you know, Cyber Sign makes them pretty dead there. They're going to go for a heavy. They'll wipe away the entire board, deal 12, and then pass back to us. We draw another level, which is really good. So we activate that, switch that warrior lady to defense. They do get back the frog, though, here, which is kind of annoying. They've got a monarch here, then that's going to be unfortunate. Demok also should probably do it. They're going to go for heavy. I mean, they don't have a way to... Oh, never mind. I spoke a little bit too soon. They do have a way to clear the Reaper. With that Chaos Orc, they're passing back to us. We draw just Emergency Provisions, which will not do it here. Even if we still had the wall, it would not do it because we'd have to use wall. Or we'd have to use E-Prov on the wall, which would not really help us that much because they've got more than enough attack power to win the game here. So, yeah, we set that, pass back to them. They just go for lethal damage. They should have switched the Demok to attack to go for that because there's no Mirror Force in this format, so no need to play around that. That's just going to be the end of the game there. And again, you know, I think the misplays in game 1 really did cost me. I think in game 2, I mean, you could argue that the going for the Stein play was a misplay there. I think that, you know, given that it did seem like Morphing Jar and that we were losing the 2 Steins in hand, like, I wanted to go for that, and I don't necessarily think that I'd call that as much of a misplay as I would call game 1, because I do think that that is a reasonable option to go for in that situation, and there are multiple different scenarios where that is the right play to make there. But unfortunately, you know, I did the wrong call in game 1 of this, or not game 1, but turn 1 of this game 2. And it did cost me this match. And of course, you know, my misplays in game 1 definitely cost me the match more. I think I could have easily won that game if I just played a bit better. And that does show, again, you know, it does take some skill to pilot this deck. It isn't just sort of like a, you know, just plug and play. You can't just load up the deck and just expect to win instantly. It does take some thought because it does play on a bit of a different axis than other decks. You have to keep in mind what outs your opponent has to the floodgates, and when they don't have any more of those outs left, you have to keep them off ways of getting them back. Things like skill drain and things like that are very important in those sorts of situations. So, unfortunately, didn't quite work out for us game 1. But let's dive into another match and see if I can actually bring the deck to fruition in that one. Okay, we got another game here against PJ Darkness, another frequent guest on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. We're going to dive in to the game here, and we open a pretty good one to start. Any game where you open Comfy is a good one. So we've got Exchange as well in case we need to also take another card out of their hand. But we go for the Comfy here, and we get a peek. So we get to see that they've got double Dark World Lightning, a Peyton of the Dark Clown, a Last Will, and a Zaborg the Thundermark. This is kind of a neat idea for a deck. So basically use Dark World Lightning, use destroy a card in the field, and send the Peyton. And because, you know, that's the last thing that happens there, you get to use Peyton, bring out another Peyton, and then use that tribute fodder for something like a Zaborg. It is a bit more complicated than doing a Cyber Dragon, yeah, but it is kind of neat, and it does deck then your deck a little bit after that. Of course, if you're going for Last Will play, then you don't really need that afterwards, but still very cool stuff. And I think for the copy, I have a couple different options here. I could take the Peyton, just cut them off from that, but if I do that, then they get to banish the Peyton and bring in another Peyton, and then they can just go for the Zaborg play next turn anyways. So I don't really want to do that. I could take one of the Dark World Lightnings, but then they'll still have the other, so I don't know if that's really as worth it. I could take the Last Will to cut them off of any, like, superb Last Will plays. But I think what I want to do here is I want to take the Zaborg. If they've got any way to turn that Zaborg online, then they pop the big shield, and that's very annoying for us. So I think what I should do is just take the Zaborg, and that is indeed what I do. So now what I do here, and I think that this play is ultimately okay. I go for Big Shield Garden and Wave Mounted Cannon. I think that's where I should end things. I could also go for Exchange, potentially set the swords, give them the 7 tools, and take, like, you know, Last Will or Peyton. I could do that. That's an option. I don't really think it's the best thing to do, but I could do it. But I think, honestly, I'm fine just sitting on this and passing. Because they go for Dark World Lightning, Big Shield Garden flips up, and, you know, the effect's negated. So that means that you don't get the discard, so they won't be able to get Peyton online, and we can go from there. That being said, what I do instead is I give them a perfectly good Dark World Lightning target in the form of 7 Tools of the Bandit. Now, why I did this at the time was twofold. One, if they draw into like a Raigeki Break or a Dust Tornado or something to pop the wave motion. I wanted the 7 tools online to stop that, right? But 2, I figure that if they're going to go for Dark World Lightning, they're going to go for it on the monster instead of the set first. And if they go for it on the monster, it will fizzle. And, they can use the other one, but they've used up a card from their hand as well. So I want them to use up both Dark World Lightnings now. The only thing that really punishes this play is like if, well, actually, I guess, no, yeah, I guess what really punishes this play is if like, I guess there are a couple things that punish this play, because I was thinking like, okay, they go for Dark World Lightning on the Big Shield, then they have to deal with Big Shield. But if they do, draw any Monarch here and go for the Lost Will play after that, then they can go Dark World Lightning on the back row after they've gone for Dark World Lightning on the Big Shield, after the Big Shield's been revealed. Go for the Monarch play with the Peyton, and then go for like, Cyberstein, do stuff with that, bring out Cyber Twin, and then they can actually crash Cyberstein into the Big Shield, flip it to attack, and then we still lose the game through that. So I think what I should have done, I just shouldn't have given them the 7 tools option at all there. It's really, really bad on my part. This play does cost me the game, in my opinion. So I have swords as well. I could activate swords. I don't think you need to activate swords if you just go for set Big Shield, activate wave motion. I think that's a perfectly fine play. But unfortunately, they do go for Dark World Lightning on the back row here. And they do use Peyton, so they banish the Peyton, and they bring out another Peyton. And they manage to actually draw into a Zaborg. So they're just going to use that. Go into Zaborg, go for Will, go into Cyberstein, and that's just the end of the game. But again, I could have staved that off with the Big Shield Garden set there. Prevented them from, getting the Peyton and Grave off Dark World Lightning. So I definitely could have played this game a little bit better. But, again, I was too cautious of things like Raigeki Break. I don't think I should have been. I don't think I should have opened up the Dark World Lightning line. But, that is what it is. So I definitely messed up that game. I also could have gone for just exchange, giving them 7 tools, and, taking the Will just to cut off plays like that entirely. Or I could have gone for exchange, taking Peyton, cutting off plays like that entirely. But either way there, it did not work out for me. And that'll be the end of game 1. So rough stuff. They didn't really see the Floodgate part of the deck, so I'm going to choose to keep the deck the same. I'm not going to go into the Smoke Screen side and see if I can win against them there. They also did, side pretty quickly, so I'm like, okay, well, maybe they didn't bring in as much side deck hate against this deck. So I think we should be able to win this one. We draw into Big Shield Garden, Nightmare Wheel, and Sangan, Tomato, and Sulfur. That's pretty good. We set the Big Shield Garden, set the Gravity Bind, pass back to them. We don't set the Nightmare Wheel because I don't want to play into Dark World Lightning this time. So if they go for Dark World Lightning on either of these cards, I can flip up Gravity Bind, stop it that way. Big Shield Garden flips up automatically when they activate Dark World Lightning. So I feel pretty good about this. They bring out a Zimbira. They attack into the Big Shield. They'll take 5 from that, and Big Shield switches to attack. Then they're just going to pass back to us. I feel perfectly fine about this position. I'm going to set the Stealth Bird, activate the wave motion here, and pass back to them. I don't want to use Nightmare Wheel just yet. I could potentially use it, but I do have Gravity Bind in case they try attacking into Stealth Bird. So I don't think I need to commit all my floodgates to board just yet. So they're going to go for heavy here, which is quite unfortunate. Then they go for Dark World Lightning on our sets. So, I mean, that had to be the draw, right? Because otherwise you would have used that turn 1. But I don't know. They just go for it. They go for Zaborg as well, popping the Big Shield, getting in for 24 here. And then they're going to pass back to us. So we do have this Nightmare Wheel, which is pretty good. We also have this Tomato. So I feel pretty good about this overall. They're going to just attack into the Tomato. We are going to bring out another Tomato from deck because we can just switch that to defense here. I don't really have a Floodgate to protect the Stealth Bird, so I don't want to bring out another Stealth Bird from deck. So I'm fine just bringing this out. They're going to tribute over for another Zaborg, pop the Tomato, and pass back to us. That's perfectly fine. We've got another Tomato in hand, so we can just set that, and we'll set the Magic Jammer as well, pass back to them. We do have the Sangan in hand to pitch. We don't ideally want to pitch Sangan, but in case they do have something here to stop our plays, we will do it if necessary. They go for Mobius, though, so they're able to pop both of our back row there. They're able to attack in over the Tomato. We bring out a Reaper. Reaper's a bit hard for them to clear at this point, and they pass back to us. We draw a Nightmare Wheel, which is very good. We can set that, pass back to them, and they're going to go for BrainCon on the Reaper. They do pay 8 for the BrainCon here as well, and they also pay 5,000 for these Steins, so they're at 1,700 here. And ultimately, I think this is pretty good for us. I mean, we are taking a fair bit of damage here, but we can Nightmare Wheel the Mobius, so that way we don't take the full amount of damage. And they'll take 500 next turn. We can summon a Sangan, attack into Cyberstein to shut off them from being able to negate normal traps. So that's pretty good, especially when this TT here. We can go for a Sangan, attack into the Stein, get them down by 300, then set a TT, pass back to them. If they commit another thing to board here, we can do stuff with that. If they don't, we can search something off Sangan. So I feel pretty good about this position. And they go for Sangan here, and I do go for TT here because I'm like, well, this is the normal summon. If I search out like Stealth Bird or something, I can attack in for 700, drop them down to 200. They're in a really, really bad spot. I can then just flip down the Stealth Bird, threaten lethal next turn, and I've got a variety of burn cards that can kill them off the top as well. I don't have any tomatoes left in deck, so I can't actually bring out a monster that can kill them just by attacking in, unfortunately. But I do think that was my mindset with TT. I'm like, okay, they'll have a search off Sangan and one card in hand, but this should be fine, right? And I think that's actually a major misplay on my part. I think what I should have done instead is held the TT because I'm not dead here. If they go, Sentry into Sangan, attack directly with Sangan, I'm down to 900. If I do get a search off Sangan, I can search Big Shield Gardna. And next turn, they'll be at 400 life points. So if I set Big Shield Gardna, they don't have any monsters they can attack into Big Shield Gardna. And if they do bring out something like Zaborg or something, then I've got TT for that. So I feel like this is a misplay on my part. I shouldn't have gone for TT here. It's, it does save me some life points, but it's a bit greedy at this point, and it's not necessary. So I should not have done this, and it will, in fact, cost me the game here, because I go for TT, they search out an Exiled Force, which is a pretty good card. I search out Stealth Bird because I'm planning on doing the play that I mentioned, where I attack him with Stealth Bird, drop him down to 200, and then flip it down. Unfortunately for us, the last card in hand was Premat, so they bring back a monster with Premat, drop us down to 500, and now we're in a really, really bad spot. Now we can't, I mean, there are plenty of cards off the top that do allow us to win the game, but, like, we need to draw those cards, and there's a very good chance that we don't. So we draw Solemn Judgment, which will keep us alive for one more turn, but it's not looking good for us here. They go for an Exiled Force, we go for Solemn there, and they will attack over the Stealth Bird. So we do survive one more turn, but the last card we draw is Fake Trap, and that will not do it. So that will be the end of this game. Again, if we had held the TT, just taken the damage, and then searched out like Big Shield Gardna, we would have won off Nightmare Wheel, I'm pretty sure. Premat would have been shut off later as well. If they'd gone for Premat that turn, we could have TT'd then. They still would have gotten the search, but we would have been able to go for the Stealth Bird backup plan that I mentioned, and been in a pretty good spot overall. Of course, at that point, yeah, because then we would have won, because they would have paid 8 for the Premat if they'd done that, so we would have indeed won the game from that. So, yeah, I think, like, we should have been able to win this one as well, but my greed on the TT, just going for the TT there, did cost us. And that will do it for the match that I got with this deck. So, again, this deck is very, very hard to play. I pointed out in multiple games here how I could have won, or I guess round 1 of this match, I maybe wouldn't have won, but I would have been in a much better spot than I was otherwise. But this game, too, I definitely could have won. Game 1 of the previous match, I definitely could have won. So, it does show that, like, with good play, this deck can be very good, but it's definitely not an easy win deck. It does take some skill to actually pilot. And I will say, like, also, there are some games that, like, if you draw poorly, like, if you draw, for instance, all your burn stuff, but no floodgates, then that can be bad for you. If you draw into things like Fake Trap or Solemns or stuff like that without having the floodgates as well, that can be bad for you. So, there are some bad draws with this deck that also lead to games where, like, you can't really win. But, I don't think that these games were that. I think that these games were a skill issue on my part. I'm just pointing out that is a flaw of the deck that can happen. Also, post-siding, the deck does suffer a little bit. So I will say that, like, I do think this deck is very, very good. I think it's probably tier 1 or top of tier 2. But only time will tell if this deck continues to be good. Like, part of the issue with a deck like this and evaluating it on a competitive level is that it is very difficult to face as well as to play. So, for instance, if my opponents were not on Monarchs, you can win against this deck with something like Bazoo Return or other powerful decks in this format, but it takes a little bit more skill because you don't have the Mobiuses to just blow out the back row, right? And a lot of people are not really accustomed to playing against a deck like this, so that can cause them to lose games that they might have otherwise been able to win. And I think that's just something about evaluating decks like this in general. So it remains to be seen as time goes on. Will this deck remain tier 1? Will it fall to tier 2? Let me know down in the comments below what you think about that. Either way, I think this deck is very, very powerful, and if you do want to play a deck like it in this format, you will probably have a good time as long as you get in the games with it, learn how to play it, and get good with it. But let me know what you think about this deck down below, as I mentioned before. If you like this sort of content and want to see more Reaper content coming down the way, subscribe to the channel. I promise you, I generally play better than in these games. But, these games, I do think that they were very, very illustrative of, how you need to play differently with this deck, and also, like, how tough this deck is to play. So that's why I decided to keep them in the video. But, in general, you get better gameplay from me than this. But Let me know what you think about these down in the comments below. Subscribe if you are interested, and if you want to support me directly as well, I have a Patreon linked in the description as well. And if you join that Patreon, you get a shout out in these videos. So big shout outs to Tyler Compton, GMYFS, Rincewind, Dump Truck, Pork Trap Coon, and Brendan Donker. It really means a lot that you all support me this way and encourage me to make more videos like this in the future. If you want to play games in Reaper format or any other format that I've featured on the channel, head on over to the YGO from Zero Discord server. But until next time, I hope you enjoyed as always. I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.